All right, good evening. My name is Jeff Wingard. I'm a representative from the Orono Town Council, and I'm joined tonight with our public safety senior staff and Councilor Sarah Marks to share with you a community conversation on public safety issues in Orono. So we're excited to have the public with us. We're excited to be joined by several people online, and I believe we'll start with a presentation tonight from our public safety senior staff.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So just for introduction's sake, my name is Dan Merrill. I'm the Deputy Police Chief, Chief Law Enforcement Officer, and Director Lowe is to my left. We heard from him last week at the community meeting. I wanted to just take a little bit of time tonight to talk about the police department, our structure, our mission, some goals that we have, and kind of what we're doing and what our staffing looks like so that people get a better understanding of what's going on in the police department. And then, as Councilor Wingard mentioned at the end, we would like to have some question and answer sessions if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask. We'll get right into it with our mission statement. So the mission statement of the Orono Police Department is to protect with vigilance, safety, rights, property, and peace of all. To serve with compassion and excellence, striving to provide aid and support to any and all in need. I really want to draw attention to the way that we have the word structured with the protect line: safety, rights, property, and peace. We really want it to be in that order. The safety of the town and the citizens is paramount to us, as well as their rights. So when we created that message, the chief before me, I know that that was one of the things that we were very adamant about how that was set up, and we wanted to make sure that that was in there. We also want something I would like to convey in this message is that we always talk about the type of police officers that we have here in Orono and that we expect more of our officers. I have some slides and I like to take a little bit of time to speak about the training that we do and the amount of instructors that we have here on staff. We're really deep and we spend a lot of time and effort into developing our people. And that's not something that people get all across the state. The minimum standard is the minimum standard, but we always try and strive above and beyond what that standard is in everything that we do. So we want that in our mission statement. It's spoken to a little bit in our vision as well. To provide exemplary service to the town through community partnerships and promoting safety, security, and the well-being for all. You see that again, similar to what we had in the mission statement. I'm a firm believer, I always have been, in community partnerships and community relationships. I think that you can get a lot done if you know who the key stakeholders are in your town and they know who you are. It's a lot easier to have a rapport before something bad might happen, or when you're just having a meeting about a mundane thing, whether or not it's parking or not, if you've met before in just a friendly conversation. Just a simple meet and greet. I know that that's what we're trying to do. It's part of the reason why we have our community policing division. Ed Lesky's with us in the crowd tonight. He's our director of community policing. He was fantastic at that during his time in the school, and we were able to continue on with that relationship building and further on those relationships that he has and that we have, I have, and all of my staff has. So we try and really have build a lot of good foundations with the people that are here in town, business owners, other departments in the town, fire department, public works. We all want to work together to accomplish these goals and the mission of ultimately. So with the mission and our vision statement in mind, we move on to talking real briefly about what the structure looks like and how we're set up. So obviously, Director Lowe is the senior person in charge of everything. Me being the chief law enforcement officer, I'm responsible for, along with Jeff, the budget, some of the council meetings. I have to be responsible for employee discipline, what's going on day to day, oversight, the general oversight of the department and how it's run. The police captain, he's utilized as basically the senior supervisor in the agency. He's responsible for oversight of patrol, how they operate, how they run, what they do, report reviews, all those things. He is the day-to-day runner of the agency from a line standpoint. That's his job. So he would oversee the supervisors and make sure that the supervisors are adequately supervising patrol. So he's that. He also does scheduling. Right now, he's responsible for some court officer duties. So he's coordinating when officers go to court and whatnot. He's responsible for internal investigations, complaints, officer complaints, and a bunch of other administrative tasks. The administrative assistant, she's one of the other forward-facing people that you'll see quite frequently, I think. If you come into the public safety building, she's upstairs behind the glass. She's the lady that answers the telephone typically when you call, if you have a concern. When you call the non-emergency number, she's great. She does everything. She'll take in our records checks. She does a bunch of filing for me. She compiles statistics for me, spreadsheets. She just pretty much is honestly the right-hand man that keeps the day in, day out things going and keeps me on task. To be honest, she calls me and makes sure she knows what I'm doing sometimes. The patrol division, they are the backbone of the agency. They are what makes the real things happen every day. They're the people that are working all day, all night, nights, weekends, and holidays. We are here 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We don't get holidays. We don't get breaks. That staff is really the core of the agency. And we truly value them, and we have a really great group of people. Our staff is really, really well trained and really good and dedicated to what it is they're doing. I think that, yeah. So they're the people that do it every day. I already spoke about Director of Community Policing a little bit. That's Ed Lesky. He's the person that Jeff had spoken about a little bit in his previous conversation. He's part of that community response task force that's kind of new. We just kind of started to put it together at the beginning of this year. So he's in that with a representative from the fire department and representatives from code enforcement. And they handle a whole bunch of citizen complaints, parking. He's really, really big into the networking and getting contacts with businesses. And if there's complaints that can be filtered through him, citizen complaints, some of them will filter through him. If they need more attention or a direct police response, he'll coordinate with myself or the captain to get those things done. If somebody calls and says, hey, we noticed that there's a lot of cars speeding on our road or something like that, then he can take that in and he can try and get more of that information, then he can filter it down to us. So really talking about that collaboration that we try and utilize a lot in the department, he's super valuable. Our community services officer, that is going to be Dan Patterson. He's the officer that you see in the school. He took over after Ed moved into this new position. He's doing a great job. He comes in daily with letting us know what's going on up at the school and keeping us apprised of what's going on. And he's got a lot of really good ideas and things that he's working on with the school to make it safer and to try and really keep that presence in the school and let the families and the citizens know that he's there to protect the students and work with them and help any way he can, whether it's teaching classes, being a mentor, or anything like that. He's really, really good at doing those things. The people that you guys may not see as much, the town may not see as much, but are really, really valuable to us too. One of them is our police services assistant. I call him our fleet manager. He cooks in his, I actually think he's probably the longest tenured member in our department, bar none. He's been here for over 25 plus years as an unpaid volunteer, comes in every morning and just does work that is, again, completely invaluable to what it is we do, because if he didn't do those things, it would be stuff that either the officers would have to take time doing, which would take time away from their patrol abilities, or things that extra tasks that I would have to do, the administrative assistant would have to do, as far as shuttling cars for oil changes, tire rotations. When they break down, he schedules all the appointments for us, getting the capital fleet bids, all those things. There are just a ton of little things that he does as an unpaid volunteer. He is like a true unsung hero in our department. He is fantastic. So our chaplain, Jerry King, he comes in and will provide support as necessary and ride around with officers and just be there as a option if need be. How do we provide these services that we just talked about with these people? For the most part, our typical day will be seen in the marked cruisers when they're out driving around, hopefully through the neighborhoods, in the schools in the morning, driving around in the marked patrol vehicles. But we also do have an aspect of that where when the weather's nice, sometimes officers will get on a bike. We have 2 mountain bikes that they can utilize. And they can be out on the trails in town, making those connections with people, or addressing issues if they see them too. Recently, we've taken complaints about dogs off leashes and dogs, not having their owners pick up after them when they go to the bathroom and whatnot. So if officers were out in those areas where those type of recreational activities are happening, then, they could have the ability to have a little one-on-one conversation, not a disciplinary thing, but just a, hey, in case you didn't know, this is an ordinance and can we be better about this? So that's a really great way to see us in another, have another avenue to have an interaction, a positive interaction, I hope, with our officers that's not behind the steering wheel of a car where it's a little hard to have that personal contact. We're out of the car, on a bicycle, hopefully, being seen as somewhat relatable to the public. And some of what we're trying to do is just that. We want to be relatable to you guys and know that we are husbands, wives, fathers, brothers, just like everybody else is. This may be a uniform that we wear, but at the end of the day, we're all the same as everybody else and citizens in town. So foot patrols, again, one of those sporadic things that kind of sometimes can go hand in hand with the business checks. A lot of times at nighttime, they can go downtown to the businesses and pull on doors or check to make sure the businesses are secure. Also, some of the ball fields, we've had times where we've had problems in the past around some of the ball fields with people hanging out in the dugouts or sleeping in the dugouts after hours and things. And it's a good way for the officer just to get out and, check out all the other areas of town. Some of the services or programs that you might not know about that we do. The Good Morning program is one that's very successful, very well received here in town. That's a program that we have where we make phone calls to typically senior citizens in town that live alone and don't have a ton of family around to check on them often. This is a program that we've had since I've been here, so it's well over 15 years now. It's been going on, and all we get from this program is positive feedback. This is a great way for us to just have, sometimes it's a 2-minute conversation, sometimes it might be a 5-minute conversation about what the weather's going to be today, what do you have on your agenda. It's just a way for us, again, to relate to and talk to the community in a different aspect. And it's not at all punitive. This is generally just calling to see how they're doing for the day, to check in on them. Some people we call daily, some people we call 2 or 3 times a week. It's completely up to the participants. So that is a program that we really like to try and plug as much as possible, because we've had feedback from multiple families before saying it's a really good peace of mind to know that our loved ones are being checked in on regularly, while we're not able to. If we don't live close by, or if we're on vacation and we're away, it's a peace of mind knowing that that's something that we do. That's free of charge. We do that just because it's the right thing to do. Car seat checks, that's another one of the things that our administrative assistant does. She'll do those out in the parking lot. She's certified through the state. So that would be like infant, toddler car seats. You can bring your car in the car seat and she can go through the whole process with you, how to properly secure it in your car. Another super beneficial way to get another member of our agency out in the public interacting with people. Crossing guards, those are the ones that you'll see at Main Street and Pine Street, and out at Westwood, which is currently being staffed by the Director of Community Policing, because we're struggling to find somebody to do that right now. But we're working on it. We have contracts out with a company to fill those positions. So that's another service that we work to staff if there aren't bodies, because it's important to the school and it's important to us to get the walkers and bikers to school safely in the mornings. The RAD class, Rape Aggression Defense, that's a Citizens Police Academy type class that, again, our administrative assistant has coordinated. She's actually doing one right now. It took a little bit of a layoff during COVID, obviously, because it's a face-to-face contact class. It's a basic woman self-defense class that she's gone away to a training class to become a certified instructor in. And again, it's another one of those classes that every time somebody goes through it, they basically talk about self-defense, and then they will actually, the last night, they will actually do practical scenarios where they actually will do hands-on practical applications with some of the moves that they've utilized. So the students will actually, for lack of a better term, get into a controlled fight scenario with the RAD instructors. And then they'll work through what they've learned in the class to empower them to know that they can practically apply what they've learned in the class earlier. So another super great class that we put on and we offer when we have the availability. So anybody have any questions so far? Is everything making sense about where we're going? We're going to start trying to move into a little bit more of the oversight of the police department and the budget and traffic and some of the data type stuff. Do you have anything online, Bill?
No.
What's
Was it
that?
13? How many?
We have 15 total when we're full staffed. Currently we're short 2 in patrol, and we're working to hire a detective sergeant, and I have 1 officer at the academy right now. So we're a little thin right now, but we've got applications and we've got conditional letters of employment out to people. We're no different than any other industry. That's what again, we're just like any other industry. We're struggling to find people as much as anybody, and recruitment and retention is something that we're consistently working to try and make better, figure out why and what keeps people and makes people happy. So, yeah, go ahead.
We were talking a little bit, your Good Morning program sounds like at some point there might be a need out there, like somebody might need transportation, and I know you all wouldn't be responsible for that, but is there any way you could jot down needs and give them to the health, the people that run the gift shop, health.
Health Association.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that like, because we were talking earlier today about aging people in the community, and how would you know if they had a need? But you've got to know a good way.
I think the biggest thing with, yes, we could. The Good Morning program is actually something where we've had success with actually finding people who have fallen, or elderly
Yes.
people who have fallen out of bed and they can't make it to their phone. And then if we can't call them, we can't get a hold of them, we actually have them sign a release saying that if we have to come down and check on you, we're going to come into your residence and make sure you're okay. And we have had, it's not an often occurrence, but we have had times when we've actually found people on the floor that need help. So again, it's one of those things. What we need is, the biggest thing is we need to know. We have, Ed Lesky's got a diverse group of people that he can reach out to that he knows for services and stuff like that. So we need to know that people have the need though. And if you know, when we're talking to those people in the morning, they seem off, like you talk to them every day or you talk to them for the most part, you get a good feeling for what the baseline is, and sometimes they feel off. So that might be a time when you talk more with them or go down and pay them a visit and see what's really going on. But that's part of that relationship and knowing what the baseline is for people. But the people that aren't on the list, they just need to reach out to us because we can provide help and we can provide services or we can steer people in the right direction. We just need to know that they might have the need. And some people are very prideful. I get it. Very extremely prideful. They don't want to feel like they have to be checked up on or they don't want to be. Because it's part of their independence, but it's no judgment on us. We do it because we want to help.
And there really isn't a threshold.
No.
If you're a senior and you're living
Right.
in Orono,
Right.
and you want to call every morning,
Yeah.
you call PD.
Yep.
And they will do that. And I think for some people, it's like, do I really need that?
Right.
And the fact is that the more people Ed has to talk to, the happier Ed is. So it works.
And so you do have some access to services or volunteers that
Yes.
could help them out.
If there's ever a need,
Yeah.
there's never been a time where I said, I don't know how to fill this need.
Yeah,
Because there's so many people who want to help.
that's great.
And it's not only for just those who want to sign up.
Yeah.
I have some I call, they want to remain completely private.
Right.
They said, could it just be between the two of us? And then if we need help, you can let someone know. And yes, so there's some not on the list, but I call them also.
Wow.
And did you say already how many of those calls the police department makes each day?
12 each day and some that they prefer no one know.
Yeah, so a little more than that.
A little more than that.
And some of those are daily and others are every couple
Yep.
of days,
And-
however they want it.
Yep, and that's what we let them structure it however they want. It's completely up to them.
I was gonna say, we would think that we were really hitting success if we could double or triple or. I would love to have to put a call out to volunteers to come help do that, which I think is the model that we're hoping for.
Yeah, you know. There have been other agencies, not so much recently, but we feel the phone calls from other police agencies or other agencies that have just said, how do you do it and what do you do? And it's really grassroots program. There is nothing rocket science about this. We get their contact information, we know where they live, and we just call them between 7:30, 8 o'clock and before 9. So we have a block of time when we call them. They know that, we bank on it, they bank on it, and it's just a super easy program that, you know, I think gets us a lot of value in the town. So it's a great service that we have for sure.
Just recently, 2 elderly individuals called out of Orono and they said, we don't have this. Would you please call us? And of course, but they wanted to be not on any list. And they just said, we know you have it. Would you please call? We heard from so-and-so. And of course, I don't know if we ever say no.
We try not to.
Yeah.
But we need to know that, and that's one of the things that we'll get to at the end is we need to know what people need to ask the questions and see and let us help. Because we're fixer bodies by nature. Most law enforcement officers, we want to try and fix problems and find a resolution. But I say sometimes we can't fix what we don't know. I don't know that there's a problem unless somebody tells us, you know, some problems are very obvious, but some not so much. All right, so kind of how the department is seen. I talked about it a little bit with the captain being the person who runs patrol. But as a general rule, just to let people know, we are accredited through the state of Maine. So within the last few years, they've come up with a state accreditation. It's called the Maine Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. It was created by a group of chiefs in consult with the Maine Criminal Justice Academy that basically said, let's create this program of standards and best practices that are policy driven, that we can essentially audit police departments to make sure that they're doing them through something that's called proofs, which is essentially just a fancy way of saying coming in and checking our law enforcement reports or our evidence room and some check sheets that we might have to make sure that we're meeting the mark of what a best practice is. So this is, again, something that I want to highlight. This is not something we're required to do. We do this because it's the right thing to do, and it holds us to that higher level, that higher standard that we're looking for. Previously, before this, we had a certification through CALIA. That was a national certification. That's a great certification. It was just very labor intensive, and this Maine-based program seemed to make a little more sense for an agency of our size. And I genuinely don't think that we sacrificed anything in the standards by going from CALIA to MLEAP. This is based in Maine. It's checked with Maine chiefs and people that are working in this career field in this state. And again, it's vetted through the Criminal Justice Academy. So it's where we get a lot of our policies and procedures from. And obviously we have the Board of Trustees standardized policies, plus all kinds of other policies and procedures that govern what we do every day. As far as some other things about how our reports and workflows go, just so people know, all of our reports, the day in and day out calls for service type reports that our officers type, they'll type them. They'll go through a review process with the sergeants that they're working with. And if they see any issues or there's anything that doesn't make sense to them, they'll bring them back to the officers and try and get clarification. This is also a process that typically the captain and I will review them too. I'll come back, when I go home on Friday, when I come in Monday morning, I always go back through the reports and just get a feel for what happened over the weekend. It's a great way to get an idea about what's been happening, the calls for service that we have and who we interacted with and whatnot. So we have that process in place. All of our use of force incidents. So use of force incident for us would be anytime we interact with somebody and we have to go hands-on with them in a fashion that's more than just like passive resistance. If I was to reach over and grab Jeff right now and he were to pull away, which would be a bad idea, that could be construed as a use of force if I was trying to effect an arrest on him or if I was trying to detain him for some law enforcement purpose. So all these things get documented and then they're reviewed by the captain. And one of the ways that we review these things is the town of Orono has been gracious enough to make the investment for us in body worn cameras. So all of our officers have the body worn camera that I have on my chest. They all have their own. So interactions with the public, uses of force, things like that, they're all captured on body worn camera, which is a very valuable tool. And I think it lends itself to the transparency that we're hoping to portray with the public too, to where if they want to make a complaint or they have an issue, we have a mechanism more than just the officer's report to go back and see what actually happened. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it definitely can help, paint a picture a little better about what may have occurred with some people. So we have that in place. There's a form that they also have to fill out, and we keep track of all of those incidents too, to see if there's anything that sticks out that might need more training needs to. It's where we can get some of our training, develop some of our trainings from, if it's from tasers or when we're doing our defensive tactics trainings or things like that. We can look back at past incidents to see if there's something I need there. So like I talked about a little bit with the internal affairs and complaints, I want to make it very clear that I said it when I was talking about the elderly people. We don't know and we can't fix what we don't know. So if somebody has a problem, or somebody has a complaint, please call. Call and talk to the shift supervisor. If there's not a shift supervisor working, call and talk to a patrolman, reach out to me or reach out to the captain. The captain is ultimately the one, if we get a complaint against an officer, who will investigate it. He'll take the complaint, reach out to whoever's making the complaint and try and gain as much information as we can to help lead him or guide him in his investigation. But we don't shy away from complaints. We want to hear both the good things and the things that don't make sense to people or the bad things that are happening. We just want people to know that, we've said it before, it doesn't matter if somebody wants to scratch it down on a napkin. If they have a complaint, we'll take the complaint, but the more information we know, the more we can do with it. You call anonymously and just say, not much, then there's not much that we can do. Detail matters, but we'll take anything. So the captain would be the clearinghouse for those type of incidents. Talked a little bit about digital media stuff when I talked about the body cams, but we also, as part of a spot check, if you will, the supervisors are supposed to just randomly go in to our body camera system and every now and then just pull some random events and just watch back a situation that they weren't at. And just see how the interaction went between the officer and the public. I heard a little while ago, it's a trust but verify thing. I believe truly and wholeheartedly that our officers are doing the right thing all the time. But again, we're trying to be transparent and we're trying to make sure that they are being professional and treating people the way that we would expect all the time. Not just some of the time, all of the time. So that's one way that we could see what's going on when we're not around, really. We'll talk a little bit about some of our training, the standards, and then what we have for, I'll just pop up a screen or slide coming up about what we have for instructors in-house. This screen talks about the basic level of training that our officers have. So the 200-hour green pin course is what you would need to become a part-time law enforcement officer in the state of Maine. That has to do with a online-based testing platform, an in-person testing platform, or an in-person component, and then you have actual component of going out and working the road under the supervision of another officer for 80 hours. That's how you get that 200-hour green pin certification. The most talked about, the full-time certification comes from going to the academy. You have to go live down there for 18 weeks and go through the stress-based with college, with curriculum intertwined in it, based scenario training to become certified in the state of Maine full-time. That's the full-time academy people talk about. That's 720 hours. They cover everything from traffic stops, situational use of force, response to mental health, everything. It's really the clearinghouse where everybody goes to get the best level of training that they can. And so that's the state standard. That's how you become a full-time certified officer. When people come back to us, or before they would go to the academy, and then maybe in combination after the academy, they would do what's called our field training program. That's an in-house program that we have where the new hires will work directly with a mentor. It's a field, we call them a field training officer. It's somebody that's been away to a school and has learned how to train these people effectively. Talked about, the most effective way, the adult learning models and how we should train them and how to move through the phases and all of that. So these are the people we have selected as FTOs in the agency are people that we would like young officers to be mentored by, to be similar to the characteristics that they have. And we try and give them more than one perspective too. So throughout their FTO program, we try and let them work with somebody for a while and then switch it up and work with somebody else. And that way they can learn two styles. Because we don't all do the job the same way. But it's important to let them see both sides. And we have them work all the shifts. They'll work day shift and they'll work night shift and they'll work overnight shift. And that way they get used to that because that's what their schedule will be too when they ultimately get out on their own. So that program, I have it up there, is 480 hours. That would be if somebody had no experience. If we got somebody that lateraled to us that already had the academy, they wouldn't necessarily go through our full 480-hour field training program because they've already got some experience and they've already worked the road. So we would augment their training as necessary based off how much experience they have. So just for reference there. Our annual trainings, those are governed by some degree, though they are governed by the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. So the Criminal Justice Academy would say at a minimum, we're required to do 2 hours of firearms training every year. And then new law updates on what's come through for legislation in the Supreme Court and Maine law. So we're required to do those every year. Along with, they always have a handful of other training topics that they want us to learn about too. They change every year. They're not the same. But they dictate what those are, and we take those through an online training portal. Typically, they're on current events or trends that are going on across the country in law enforcement. Those are the topics that we typically train on. So some of them I listed here. In the years past, we've talked about situational use of force, the implicit bias, de-escalation, active shooter response is a big topic right now in law enforcement. And that's one where you'll see on one of the next slides, we actually have 2 instructors that have been away to a federal training that fortunately has been free of cost to us to get them to become the trainers so they can come back and train our people on the most current safe tactics of response to active threats. So yeah, we're super fortunate to have those type of things. And situation use of force is one of those high liability topics that whenever we go out to the firearms range once a year with our pistols, and then typically once a year with our rifles, we always talk about deadly force and the section in criminal law that governs the use of deadly force by law enforcement officers. So we try and break that down and make sure that everybody can talk us through what the thresholds are to utilize deadly force, to get them talking about it and thinking about it before we will go do our annual training. So that's something that we train on that quite a bit, because that's a real high liability topic.
Dan, I think that earlier in the slide presentation, you talked about our supervision strategies. Could you talk a little bit about supervision and oversight with regard to use of force and how we are reviewing what use of force is considered in the agency and how we review it?
She stepped out. She stepped out.
Okay, I'm
We covered
sorry.
that.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I asked.
You were throwing me for a loop because I'm like, I think I talked about
sorry.
that, but I can circle back if need be.
No, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So just a list real quick of some of the things that we have in class or in-house. These are certifications. And to be honest, I don't think this is even all encompassing of all the training instructors that we have in-house. Yeah, it's for a small agency of 15 people, that's a pretty expansive list. That speaks to the level of training that we have in our agency. And we try and be as self-sufficient as we can to train our people, because if we train together, we're all going to learn together, because if something goes sideways, we want to all be on the same page. So if we're going to really high level trainings and getting really good training, we want to all be able to move in sync together. And I think that we do a really good job of that. We have some really good scenario-based training that we try and do at least annually in some way, shape, or form. Do you have any questions on certifications or training or anything like that? Anything not making sense? Hearing nothing?
Actually, I do have a question.
Yeah.
On the mental health,
Yeah.
what training do police officers have? Or are required? I'm just wondering if that's really a job for police officers and what kind of training you have as regards that.
So
You get a call, from somebody because, anybody could call about anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean. You've heard of swatting. Have you
Yeah.
heard of swatting?
Yeah.
Okay. So
So-
I'm just wondering what your training would be.
So the training classes that we would go to, typically, one of the trainings would be the crisis intervention officer training. That's a week-long class that's held. Typically, we try and catch it when it's in Bangor. It's put on by NAMI, correct? Pretty sure that's the new name. So
Who did you put on
NAMI,
by?
NAMI, National I don't know what the acronym is off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yes.
I know it as NAMI. I know it's a national agency. But so that would be one of the things that we would go to. And there's also a mental health first aid class. It's an 8-hour course that some people would have, and it would also be put on by a similar training group. And you know, I understand what you're saying, but I think that what happens with law enforcement is we can become the clearinghouse because we're the first responders that have to go deal with the problems in the town. So when somebody calls, we have to go look into them. And it may not be something that we can fix. We spoke about it a little bit with the Good Morning program earlier. It may be something where somebody does need a higher level of service or care than what we can provide, but it is still on us to respond and try and see if we can help get that person to where they need to go or connect them with the resources that they need. It's a function of being the first responders. We're supposed to be jack of all trades and pretty well versed in a wide array of things that aren't just tactics and traffic stops. We're finding that we really need to become a lot better versed in mental health and response to that and what services are out there.
Is it more about being able to identify when the issue in front of you might be a mental health issue as opposed to a law enforcement?
So I think the biggest thing to take away from this is that most of our training, both the fire side and law enforcement side, is more on awareness, de-escalation, how to manage those people when they're out of control, and then do referrals from there. And sometimes referrals work, sometimes they don't. We have repeat customers. We are not, either on the law enforcement or fire side, we're not mental health professionals. We don't pretend to be mental health professionals. We don't have the time to do all that training. And really that's our focus is awareness and like I said, de-escalation when we can and referrals. And you know, if it's necessary, then we take additional measures with EMS and we'll bring them in for care if we have to. So it's not our focus, our mission is not trying to manage mental health conditions in the street. It would never be. That would be catastrophic for both the patient and us.
Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question well enough.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what kind of training you had.
Yeah, so yes, go ahead.
Is it bias training? I know we didn't really get a chance to go over. I just wanted if you expand upon that. Maybe?
That would be one of the classes that was one of the elective classes that we would have had to have taken through the main criminal justice academy. So it would have been a course that would have been constructed by the criminal justice academy, and we would take it to our online portal. So typically what that involves is a slideshow presentation with some videos in them about what implicit bias is and you know how to recognize it and what we should do. So that's one of the places that we've got that from.
So that's the core training that you received through the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. But here internally, the town has hosted several opportunities for education on implicit bias, diversity, equity, and a host of those topics. I'm sure the town manager, if you were looking for a little more background, the town manager could give you that. I mean, I think annually, at least once a year, we have some type of training. If it's not somebody coming in and delivering something personally. During COVID, we had Mandy Levine, who's well known on those topics, who provided us with Zoom training because we weren't able to meet, necessarily in person. And we had a few other opportunities that have come up. So while the Criminal Justice Academy stuff comes around every now and again, it's been a directive of the town administration. Frankly, it's filtered down through the council that we have this training on a regular basis.
So just to cram some numbers real quick, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these slides, just so people know. These are the calls for service data that I've compiled for the last few years. When I totaled up what would be FY 20, 21, and 22, that would equate to about 15 calls for service a day. over the course of a calendar year that we would handle. The numbers are pretty consistent. It looks like we're on track to be in the 5,500-ish area calls for service. So just so people know what we're handling for complaints in the course of a budget year.
Dan, that is not every interaction that a law enforcement officer in Orono has with a
No.
resident works, right? There's
No.
all the things that Director Lesky does. There's all the other interactions that aren't cataloged as
Yeah.
calls for service.
Yep, yeah, so calls for service would be, essentially, it's just what it sounds like. Anytime somebody would call either the non-emergency line to report a complaint or make a call into our dispatch center. It would be your accidents, lost properties, found properties. Some of the proactive activity that our officers do as far as directed patrols. Family fights, disorderlies, all those type of things are what generate our calls for service. So that is not necessarily telling the picture of everything that we do in the course of the day or the course of the year, but it's a portion of it.
You had that broken down by like what you end up doing more or less of? Is that next? Okay.
You might need to break it down more in conversation, but I.
Yeah,
got, like, two or
to some degree, I have it. I can get that information. When we typically pull information for like our annual reports in the police department section, I typically try and pull out the higher, the more, some of the things that would be of interest, I feel like, to the people in the town. So in the past, I think in the last annual report, I gave the mental health or welfare check calls for service that's been in there. The amount of OUI arrests that we've made, the amount of drunk and disorderly or noise complaint type issues, those type of things. I do gather that data and I provide it to the for the annual report, but it's nothing I have built in, like broken down by we handled, 30 OUIs last year and 26 fights and stuff like that. I just didn't want to get that much into the weeds on a presentation like this, but it's something that we could find.
And if somebody asks for that information, pull a report and give them.
We can get it if need be. So again, same thing with the calls for service. This would be traffic stop data. So anytime we would stop a car in the town, the officers would either issue a summons or a warning. And those are brought back and those are cataloged and we keep track of that data. As of, well, I started it in last year where I wanted to I've created a spreadsheet. It's going to be a working document where we're tracking that data as far as, who are we stopping by ages and by sex and by race, and what's our number of traffic stops, traffic warnings, calls for service, parking tickets, all that. It's data that I've started to try and gather and track to try and get a better grasp of what we're doing, because I found that having to go and create these things was becoming cumbersome. So why not just get ahead of the curve and have it already so that I can get it to people whenever they ask.
That mostly speeding.
No, you'd be surprised. That's a mixed bag of things. We stop for, we do have speeding violations, but seatbelts, distracted driving, inspection stickers, registration, loud exhaust, all of it. We'll stop a car for whatever we're allowed to, if need be. And as far as tickets and warnings go, we typically leave that up to the officer for their discretion based off their training and experience, the interaction that they're having with the person. We let them make that decision because it's their stop to run. And if somebody calls me or wants to complain about parking ticket that they might have gotten written, the standard answer that I always give to them is I direct them back to the officer who wrote the ticket, because I wasn't the person that wrote the ticket. I don't know anything about it, so I don't want to undermine the authority that our officers have. So I direct them back to them and let them handle it. If they need more help or they want to appeal something or they don't like it, then maybe they might end up talking to me, but I try and initially send them back to the officers. Sorry, go ahead.
What's the fiscal year like?
The low one,
Yeah, like what-
June 30.
Oh, sorry,
So is it, so what happened? I mean, was 2021 the COVID year?
COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured it's hard to tell, but if that was 21, 22 or 20.
Yep, you'll see that. Then the next slide talks a little bit about some of our criminal data that I talked to about, which that one actually kind of surprised me that we didn't see a massive dip as much. I think some of what you'll see in this data for FY22 and FY23 is one, staffing. We've started to become short-staffed, so proactive actions and writing of summonses and things like that harder to do when you're short-staffed because you're just running all over the place. And also, I think that there's a little bit of a change in the criminal justice system to where we're trying to divert as many people as we can. And there's new protocols in place about not unnecessarily penalizing people who are trying to work or aren't as advantaged or, not as economically stable as some. So there's a lot more deferrals and dispositions and trying to work through more of a global resolution than just tickets and criminal and taking people to jail. So that's I think it's kind of a shift that's coming a little more current in criminal justice now. So we're working through that, but I think that's part of the number that you're seeing there too, along with staffing issues. So just the last couple of slides, just so people can see the budget. Our budget is up. Well, the current budget that we're in right now is up $117,000 from previous year. The next slide, I'll talk about some of the drivers of that. For FY23, the police department's a union. So they entered into a new 2-year contract. So with that new contract, they got some additional incentives, monetary incentives, as long as pay raises to keep them consistent with what other area agencies are getting paid. So that's a pretty sizable portion of what the increase is in the budget. I'm also seeing right now that vehicle maintenance, keeping cars around longer with higher miles, they're starting to break down more and repairs are expensive. Labor parts, they're hard to come by and they're very expensive. And I try and say they don't make rental police cars. I'm not trying to make light of that, but they don't make rental police cars. If a police car breaks, I have to fix it. I have to take it to a reputable repair shop and I have to get it fixed because I need them on the road so I can get my people to where they need to be. It's it's how we get out and do our job. It's a core function of our job, having police cars that work and function properly. So, a good portion of our budget is vehicle maintenance and fuel expenses. Cause like I said, I have this data too, but I think it's about 25,000 miles a year, 20 to 25,000 miles a year we could drive per frontline car. So there's a lot of driving around and proactive work that happens every year. So, these cars aren't driven the same as everybody else's cars. They're worked all day, just like our people work in all weather conditions, in the worst snowstorms, the worst ice storms. They're working and they are running, and that with it comes the added costs. And it sometimes doesn't make sense when a car with 70 or 75,000 miles breaks down, but it's just because they have this added wear and tear of being used day in and day out. And it's just a function of what our job is to some degree. And that's not saying that we don't take good care of our cars, because again, I spoke about our fleet maintenance guy. He is on the ball when it comes to oil changes and tire rotations. He just did one this morning. He's like, we're at 5,002 miles. I gotta go get an oil change. I'm like, have at it, buddy, go get it done. And he'll get those tires rotated. And so I take pride in our fleet looking professional, just like our officers too. So we want to maintain them and we keep them in tip-top shape, because I think that our cars serve as a representation of us as an agency and the town in general. So when we're going to trainings or we're out and about in public, I hope that they're clean and they present well and they look good, because that's important to me. So
Your Coles Landing up there, I'm wondering, what does that consist of?
So there's some community contracts. That's something that we can talk about when it comes to budget time. It is In the summer months, there's 8 weeks where we have a contract with a security company to monitor parking and permitting boats out at Gould's Landing during the peak time. So July to the end of August, we have people out there and they serve as even making contacts with people about dogs off leash and where they're supposed to be swimming and making sure that the landing just doesn't become impassable with cars while people are out recreating on the lake and whatnot. So I put that in there because that's a cost that we have along with the crossing guards that I mentioned earlier.
That's subcontract, it's not a, or a police officer.
It's not something that we do, no, it's something that we use an outside, I can't remember the name of the company off the top of my head. Page Employment, yeah, sorry, Page Employment. And the animal orphanage is a contract that we're required to have, by law, we're required to have a contract with an animal orphanage to take places to take our animals to. So I just threw a couple of those in there just so people would know that those things do exist.
And that as things get more expensive, they too have gone up.
Yes, yes. Contract costs go up, that's for sure. So I think you were going to speak on the last two things, weren't you?
Yeah. So as Dan said, I'm the Director of Public Safety, and where Dan is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, he's got responsibility for all of the operational stuff that I can't manage because I'm not a sworn police officer. But what I am, I come to find out, I never expected, is a manager, and I have an ability to corral and speak to people, and I guess I understand people a little bit. So that's how I ended up in the spot that I'm in, with trying to help along and bring along Dan and my deputy chief, so that when I leave, they're able to step in and take over. So I don't know when that's going to be, but we'll see. So part of my job, in addition to helping with labor relations and higher level discipline and those types of things, is to help them plan with strategic planning overall and goal setting and that type of stuff. So up here in front of you, you see some of the agency goals that we have moving forward. And we could have very easily just pulled, simple agency goals like reduce mileage or reduce fuel or whatever, but that's really low hanging fruit. And it really doesn't get to the needs of the community or the needs of the department as a whole. So you can see a few unique things up there that we're looking for. Number one is to continue to support the community through the task force. Like Dan alluded to, that task force consists of the life safety inspector, fire department. It consists of Ed through community policing, and also Pat through code enforcement. What we're trying to develop is a one-stop shop. So if you have a complaint about people on your property, like we recently managed, or you have a complaint about vehicles on a lawn, or you have a question about building, or can I put a bedroom in here, or whatever the case may be, you call one number, and wherever it's going to go, whoever picks up that number will make sure it goes where it has to go to. Number one, you don't get redirected. Number two, if you're looking at redevelopment or anything like that in the community, or you have a problem with rats or some other infestation or whatever, this group comes together, and sometimes I get chucked in the middle of it, and we collectively work out whatever the problem is with the person who's made the call or has the concern. So by taking a holistic approach to whatever's going on, we're able to look at it from different angles. We don't have people bouncing around to different places. They're able to talk to everybody all at once, and we're able to deal with whatever issues are that come up. And we definitely want to support that. We've found really good results from it, and we're looking for ways to expand that so that we can be more effective. And if there's efficiencies to be had, more efficient for the community in general. So that's one of the things that we're doing. The other thing is we're looking at redefining what it means to communicate with the community and what tools we can use to do that. Like Dan alluded to, we really struggle with community communication and getting feedback back, whether it's positive or negative. We see it on the fire side as well. And, we use typical things like we use the Orono Observer, or we use the annual report, use Facebook, or whatever the case may be. Now, we know there are electronic social media platforms that we can use for younger generations, which we're certainly going to explore. Things like, if TikTok stays around, you may see a TikTok page for us, or we may go to Clapper or something like that. Who knows what we're going to do? I'll bring you up to speed.
Okay, I need some balance.
So we're looking for those ways, but another way that we need to communicate is to communicate transparently. We've heard that loud and clear. And while it may be simple to say it, for us who have always kind of worked behind the scenes, if you will, it's hard to understand what that means and what can be put out when we talk about transparency. So one of the things you're going to start seeing from us in the not too distant future, and remember, we're short staffed, so this may take a while, is some of the data that we talked about, like number of arrests and number of traffic stops and reason for traffic stops and those types of things. It's going to become a monthly distribution for what your police department's doing, what types of things are going on in your communities, what types of criminal activity, perhaps, would be the way we might put it, are you seeing? So you've got some awareness, you know what we're doing. And anything else that we can publish out there so you understand what's happening in town. Both on the fire side and law enforcement side, for you to not know how we operate. And so our policies and procedures, the one that we can distribute, will certainly be available for the public to be able to click on our website and say, hey, how do they handle this? Oh, hey, there it is right there. There's the policy. Now I'll tell you, they're kind of wordy, but that doesn't mean that you can't see them. So things along those lines, how we handle citizen complaints, those types of things should all be out there for you. Now, I will tell you that law enforcement has a tactical side to it. There are bad things that are done that require some aggressive action, and some of those tactical things won't necessarily be publicized because they put both the officers and the community at risk. So if you want to know how we're going to handle a barricaded subject, you probably won't find that online. You might be able to make a call and they can give you some overall information, but that would be like your favorite football team publishing their playbook online so that all the other teams could see it. It doesn't make sense, and it puts people at risk. But all that other stuff, there's no reason for it not to be out there. So when we talk about redefining and retooling, we're talking about all that stuff and certainly the transparency piece, because it's important to have out there. We are going to continue to engage the community on conversations like this. If we need to have, or there's a desire for a neighborhood conversation, we'll certainly do neighborhood conversations. I have tried to do strategic planning in the fire department to have conversations around that. I failed miserably. I don't know what happened with getting the public in, but we're going to try that again. And at some point in the next 12 months or so, you will see a police department strategic planning session. And those strategic plans have to be community oriented. They have to be. We can't work in a vacuum and just start doing things without knowing what the community wants from us. There are certain things and certain legislative things that your police department has to do, but there are also other things that the community might want to see more of from the police department. We can't know that, or we can't know where to focus attention if we don't get feedback from the community in general. Same on the fire side. So for me, at my level, community-oriented strategic planning is critical to be successful and make sure we're meeting the needs of the community. So getting that feedback. When you hear it come, I really hope that we get some turnout for it, because it's again super important. And the last thing is, we really want to have a harmonious relationship with the DEI committee when it starts on here. We have a perspective of the community, and sometimes our perspective is myopic in that we look at it from the law enforcement point of view, and that may not always be the best way to look at it, especially when we're trying to handle disputes or complaints or resolve conflicts, those types of things. My hope is that we have an excellent working relationship with this group, and that we're able to share thoughts and ideas and approach some of the challenges that are out there in a collaborative effort. So we can either dispel rumors, or we can say, hey, you know what, we didn't think of it that way. You're absolutely right. How else can we approach these issues as they come up? Or how else can we deal with these situations? So I, for one, am excited to have the committee coming in and to be able to give us some valuable feedback on what they're seeing and what they're hearing, and to work with them. I think this is a good thing that very often isn't seen as a good thing and could potentially be a huge benefit. So we can go to the last slide, I guess, Dan. And the last one, the questions that continue to not be answered, to continue to rattle around in my head and others' heads is how can we maximize community engagement beyond the things that we've already talked about? And what barriers are there that exist in communicating with the police department? And if you don't have answers now, you have answers later on, something trips in your head and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. You can email me, you can email Dan, you can email Sophie, you can email any one of us. And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna take that information in. It's important. We need to know those things. And we can't improve the service we provide if we don't know the areas that we're falling down in. And I think we provide a pretty good service now, but I think that there's always opportunity for growth and to get better, so. And I guess that kicks over to them now, right, Dan? For anybody who has
Yeah,
questions.
comments? Things people would like that. Good.
Well, one thing I was wondering about is the Michelle Lake Campground.
Yep.
We get a large number of people. Wondering how you deal with that.
What does that mean to you? I don't know what large number of people means.
Well, it's like an RV park, so
Yep.
for the 4 to 5 months that it's open, I don't know, 200 people.
Mhm.
I mean, huge, many cars, much speeding.
Mhm.
And I guess I didn't know, it requires, I don't know how much policing goes on out there and around there. But it certainly adds a dimension to our neighborhood that's not there the rest of the year.
Yep.
And would require something.
The speed limit out there is 25, they've got it marked. And if you come out there with a gun or something, you'll pick up 50, 60 miles an hour just between the end of their dirt road and Forest Avenue. I've seen people peeling out of there really fast. And then others with a pickup truck, they've got to do their donuts and they've got to leave their rubber tires on the road.
Mhm.
And it's not just there, it's on Forest Avenue too.
Yep.
But it's annoying because they're throwing dust up. Well, the camp road itself
Yeah.
is gravel, dirt. They throw up dust all over and that's nothing to do with you guys.
Right.
But they'll speed out to Forest Avenue and then take off and go out. And when they do, they're throwing their trash out constantly. We'll go out there in the spring, or we do now when the snow goes down a little bit, and pick it up. But then it's a mess again real quick. And the other problem we have, it's not just us with Orono Landing Road, it's the Forest Avenue between Essex Street and the roundabout. They're just, it's 45 mile an hour. But if you go out 45, you've got somebody 2 or 3 right in your tail. You look in your mirror and there's nobody there. And you look again and they're right on your tail. And there's been accidents out there too, particularly when they're headed west. You'll get to that curve at Orono Landing Road.
Right by there, yeah.
And we picked up all kinds of car parts and who knows what.
But we have a new sign now.
Yeah, we have a new
You guys
sign.
were really good about bringing
It
us a new
wasn't that
sign.
long ago. I went out there and I saw the guy hanging upside down in his car.
Yeah.
Somebody else laying outside. And, response people came and took care of it, but
It's definitely one of the roads.
it's frustrating because we try to.
Yeah.
Try to keep it 45, but.
We
don't
try
have
to
anything
also.
Control over that.
We try to also. But it's
You
definitely.
know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. It's a stretch of road that we've fielded complaints about for sure, and it's definitely one that we're aware of, definitely. Hard part sometimes with speed enforcement is there's not really great shoulders or places to park on Forest Avenue. So if I put on my safety hat, I gotta try and position my officers in a place where it's safe for them to be able to run traffic without getting run over, figuratively and literally. Because that would create a compounding issue. So there's spots that they have that they will sit in. And it's always great when people call and say, hey, you can sit in my driveway. That's nice. We like to do that. But yes, it's definitely something. We're coming into the time of the year and we need to start reminding people that winter's past, spring is here, roads are not super highways, give them a little more attention. So it's a springtime enforcement thing that we typically do anyways, try to do.
And I think when we have staff, Dan is really good about trying to peel people off for details to spend time in problem areas. And the way to make that happen sometimes is to let Dan know that there's a problem in a particular area. I know that we had calls earlier this year from Forest staff and College Ave, and Park Street, and we ran Webster neighborhood, so we ran details when we had staff for that. The other piece is definitely out on Forest Ave. If, when you call, if you know somebody who would be friendly to let us sit in a driveway, it'd be helpful.
And we try and, again, with our details, I wish I could sit somebody out there for a day or even 4 hours. Just like Sophie spoke about a little bit, don't really have the resources right now. We have, if and when we get to full staff, it's easier for me to bring people in just to do that. And there's grants sometimes that pay for that. But with the amount of shifts and hours that our people are working right now, to bring them in or request that they do that on top of their normal hours is just not something that I think is feasible right now. Because we're trying to keep them safe and coherent in just working their normal work weeks. So they just mix it in. So when they mix it in now, it's like an hour, hour and a half here and there. Try and pick peak times, like if it's a school morning or a business morning, go out early in the morning or later in the afternoon or something like that, and vary the patrols. That's another time. Like maybe I'll be there 9 o'clock this morning. Maybe I'll be there 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And you don't always get used to seeing us in the same places and at the same time, to try and mix it up and let people know. So we're trying.
It'd be nice if Orono got the reputation out there like VZ had on their main drive. That's
I hear
a
that a lot.
35 mile an hour. You better not go 36.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
And I don't know when that started. A long time ago. But you just had the reputation. So that'd be really neat if First Avenue was like.
Right. Yeah. Any other concerns, questions? Counselors, anything for us?
Dan, did you say, I mean, just for folks, maybe I missed it, how short-staffed are you right now? Did I say-
2 short in patrol. I'm short a detective sergeant, and I have 1 guy at the academy.
And you have one trainee.
And I have 1 trainee who just finished up his field training, so that helps.
Wait, so that,
So hasn't been to the
Hasn't,
academy
right.
yet.
He's completed the 400, he's finishing up his 480 hours of field training time right now, actually.
so you're sort of short 3, but maybe only 2 when this person's kind of fully there?
Definitely short 3. We have 2
Yeah.
patrol openings and 1 detective
Yeah.
opening.
Yeah.
1 at the academy and up until like this week,
Yeah.
1 that was in field training and so wasn't a body that we could use. So at one point, we were trying to cover all of our patrol with 7 people, 1 of whom was assigned full-time to the school. So we were asking people to work an incredible amount of overtime. That is not safe, not only not safe for them, but I don't think we don't want somebody who's cranky, tired and cranky in a patrol car. That's not a good thing.
Something we found out with them that's actually feedback that they've given us is that it's not necessarily even working 14-hour shifts. Don't get me wrong, 14-hour shifts aren't fun. It's not having the time to decompress in between the shifts. So it's almost the frequency of the shifts. If you're working 5 and 6 days a week, you're not getting that decompression time that we need to be able to just straight decompress and just not be on the high level of alert that we're on when we're working. So it takes a toll on our body, and like Sophie and Jeff have kind of spoke about, we're trying to be cognizant of that because burnt out, for lack of a better term, they could be grumpy, and rightfully so because they're here on their 6th shift and it might be their, it might not be 65 or 70 hours a week, but if you're on your 5th shift and you've worked 5 shifts in a row for a full month, your wife and your family and your significant others and your decompression time is not adequate, I think. So we're augmenting that right now. Actually, we've made some changes and it's getting better for them right now. So.
We have Dan Demerit online.
Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person with everybody. Hello. I'll make sure I got a late start, but I'll make sure I watch the whole video online. I find these to be great resources. So thank you everyone for participating. Dan, I wanted to ask you is, have we ever looked at it, Jeff, are cameras an opportunity for traffic monitoring? You know, in terms of those cameras that can write, I know they use them around, you know, red lights in urban areas. Is that something is ever something could be installed on a rural road like Forest Avenue to help catch people in the act and then maybe send them, you know, a violation that way?
I think that's an infrastructure issue. That's I know that they exist, and like you speak about, they're more in the densely populated areas. I don't know that our technology, at least from what I know, I don't know that our technology is up to par where we have the mechanisms in place at the state ticketing level to be able to capture those license plates and send them in for violations. It's a little different than the highway with the speed passes, because obviously you got a captive audience. They have to go through these lanes and, you know, they get uploaded to the system, however, in the interwebs work. I could get you a definitive answer, but my suspicion is we're not there infrastructure wise to be able to have that technology that works.
So the other thing I would add is this is where I put it back to town council, since there are 3 counselors here. And that is, there are implications when you put cameras up. So we have cameras that simply see when there is a car that comes up to a stoplight to tell the stoplight where it should be in its phase. When those cameras went up, council got a lot of calls. I got calls, Rob Yerxa got calls, because people thought that they were cameras that captured video and were paying attention to what was going on beyond the fact that it tripped a beam. And people were really unhappy and felt like it was a search or a violation of privacy. So I think if that's a direction council wanted to go, that would be a bigger conversation than just, is it possible, but also what are the potential ramifications of that and what would the community think about that? So I never say no to a counselor. I just say, careful what you wish for.
And
Yeah,
just
no,
so you
I
know-
wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't moving a ordinance or anything like that. I just was interested in the response. But Jeff, I'm sorry.
You're good. We do have some of those variable messaging the feedback signs that we actually just moved them. We had them in Forest Avenue and Bennett Road for a long time. We just moved them to another location on Forest Avenue and over to College Avenue. So those just purely sense when a car goes by and they can let us know what the speeds are on that. So those are something that I've been working with Rob Yerks a little bit to try and we could use, if we were good at data and we had a lot of resources and time, right? We're gonna talk about resources and time for a second. I could have people that could compile this data and tell me specifically what the highest violation times are and when cars are passing by these signs, and then I can allocate resources to that. I just gotta find time and resources to be able to do that, and money for more signs. So it is doable, and those are like the baseline. There's no video capturing with those, so there's not as much of the concerns like what Sophie spoke about. And we've found that they've been pretty successful, actually. They give us a lot of data, those variable feedback signs do. So it's definitely something if the council wished, we could look into getting more of them. Just takes time and money.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we have any other?
Well, no, I just wanted more information about that. So if you were to stop up here at a light, what kind of identifying information does that
Nothing.
give somebody?
Nothing.
So if I were to like go like that or something, you would capture that and then show up at my door and issue me a summons or something?
It is simply capturing that a car has reached a certain point to then trip the signal to go. And I will just say in Maine in winter, in really varied conditions, I'm not guaranteeing it always works, but that's what it does when it's supposed, that's what it's supposed
No,
to.
my only concern is, the whole Big Brother is watching thing constantly. I just, that would be a concern of mine.
I was one of the people that called and complained to my counselor years ago when those went up, because I shared the same concern, because I really value living in a small town where I get to talk to public officials. And one of the things that I've found has been best in my interactions with the Orono PD has been the amount of discretion that individual officers are afforded, so that when I interact with a police officer in town, they feel empowered to make a choice that they feel comfortable with, right? Which to me has been great. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna raise some of the same concerns about the cameras. Oh, yeah, what I was gonna ask is certainly not gonna solve like everyone who speeds, right? But who controls the speed limit, for example? Like what would dropping, and again, it's not gonna solve everyone, certainly, but what would dropping it by 5 miles an hour do for
So-
safety on those particular bridges?
So, the state of Maine controls speed limits, on town ways. All of our town ways that we have qualify for 25 miles an hour, which is the lowest speed limit for the state. But once you get out onto Route 2, the minor collectors, the major collectors, anything within the urban compact that's a state road, they are the ones that establish the speed limit. So Rob Yerxa, who we've mentioned him several times, I don't know if we've said he's the Director of Public Works and Engineering for the town. He would be the contact for people. So Rob and Dan work in concert for speed concerns, road safety concerns, lighting concerns, traffic light concerns, traffic calming measures, traffic control measures. So, but even on state roads, Rob is really good at taking the information, the concern, but working with the state to get analysis. We sometimes disagree with the state. So as an example, College Avenue, if the state had its way, would be 10 miles an hour faster. And we as a local town have said we don't want that to happen on College Avenue. The university supports that, so we work together. So the way, if you've got a concern that a speed limit is too fast, always talk to Dan or Rob. They will work together, and then they work with the state. The issue that you run into is that the state has guidelines, and we can push guidelines as much as possible, but ultimately we have no way of appealing.
I have a couple more. Oh, you still got.
I was just gonna suggest that would be a much, especially from a DEI perspective, as full disclosure, someone who's gonna be on that committee. That would be much better than the cameras. There's a lot of the privacy concerns that you had mentioned, and all sorts of other issues that those cameras would run. And so I feel like alongside education and potentially lobbying the state as you're doing, even if it's a failure, would go a lot more than putting in cameras.
I had just a couple comments about, I think the rotaries, I do appreciate those. I think those are a good idea and to keep traffic moving. And stop the congestion, but I also think the lights that you put up at the crosswalks, I know up off Park Street, those are really helpful. And if you have any plans to put in any more of those in places that are.
I defer to you.
The answer to that is yes. We have to be careful with crosswalks. There are actually criteria for where crosswalks can go and where those pedestrian actuated beacon crosswalks go. We're actually working through pulling together about 10 years of studies of the Route 2 corridor and filling in some places where we haven't studied that we need to. Working with the State Department of Transportation for federal funds that would actually address safety issues, including raised crosswalks, pedestrian actuated beacons, sidewalk bump outs so that you get closer, ways to create more of a village feel. Because the reason, sometimes the reason that you have speeding is because people see why they feel safe going fast. So we use, for cheap, we use paint, you can use sidewalk bump outs, you can use those traffic. They're not speed bumps anymore, they're speed tables, they're bigger. So we're evaluating all of that. We had a citizen advisory committee that was helping us do a Main Street corridor upgrade. The problem is that what we designed, that we thought was just the bare minimum, that we thought we would have $700,000 to address, came in at 1.9 million. So we then applied to the state for some help, and the state put in one of the congressionally directed spending grant applications for us, because we can't on Route 2, for 2.4 million. And that sounded like a great idea. And we're sitting around the table and it's like, but all the infrastructure under the road, the drainage, the things that contribute aren't being addressed, which is why the raise grant came in. So that would actually address the Route 2 corridor, look at the intersection with Bennett Road and Main Street, because that's a real safety hazard there. And our traffic lights and our pedestrian crossing at signalized intersections. So the answer is, yeah, we're just hoping to do it in a planned way so that ultimately the whole corridor will work together. You are not wrong that when we sought to address the problem at the Rangeley Park intersection where we had significant, severe, numerous car accidents.
Yeah.
That really helped that intersection. We're now seeing significant, severe, and numerous car accidents at the Washburn intersection. And we're seeing more backup at College. So the hope is that instead of looking at this is a problem in this area, that by looking at the whole corridor, we'll be able to implement solution that will actually get people from here to here in a much better way. The other thing we're looking at is not everybody drives a car. We don't want people in Orono to drive cars if they don't need to drive cars. We have the highest per capita alternative transportation in the state. So we have the highest number of cyclists and pedestrians. And we want to find a way for cars, bikes, and people to safely use this corridor simultaneously. Some of that requires kind of making a village feel this corridor, so people don't think that they have this wide road to just fly at.
Yeah.
So
That's why, yeah, those beacons really help.
yeah,
I have one other thing about, speaking of these things. From Bennett, when you take a left off Stillwater, several years ago, I actually spoke to someone from the town about that and how there's not a signal at the light, a left turn signal onto Bennett from Stillwater Avenue if you're actually heading south from Old Town. Okay. And you know how the traffic, if you have an Alphond game or something that comes off the interstate at, is it exit 51? And it just used to stream through, and traffic couldn't turn left if you were taking a left onto Bennett. So you'd have to somehow, you'd be in a situation where you just can't turn, or somebody will have to turn fast. And I think it's a real hazard. And I'm just wondering, I was told several years ago that I would have to contact somebody in Old Town about it. It's the Old Town manager's issue, not the town of Orono.
well,
So I'm just wondering, because I still noticed several years later, there still isn't a left turn signal at that light.
so I think part of the reason you'd be directed to Old Town is because it's in Old Town. That is the city of Old Town. That's not the town of Orono. So I do know that our Public Works Director has been working really hard to try to get Old Town to work with Orono in the state to address the corridor. But the town line in Orono is right after Dunkin' Donuts. And it does, and then on Bennett Road, the town line is right after the cemetery. So that corner is not,
So it's not an issue.
well, it's still an issue.
Well, right, it is an issue, but I mean, it's not necessarily, right jurisdiction. Yeah, okay.
And while we have expressed the concern
Mhm.
in the regional conversations that we can have, just like, you know, they can't come into Orono. Streetlight, you know, in here. Okay.
We're over time. I'd like to see if there's any last questions or comments people would like to offer.
I have some, but I can hold them for future council meetings.
Yeah, we should.
I mean, I think it should be for the public if they have them.
Yeah. So seeing no other public comment at this time, I'd really like to thank everybody that participated. I'd like to thank our public safety staff. I'm gonna take advantage of 1 second of your time and say, back in my early career, before I was a teacher, I worked for several years as a police officer. I am much happier living in a town that has a community focus like Orono does. I'm a happier resident, I'm a happier parent than I would have been living in a town where had the mindset that I had 25 or 30 years ago as a police officer. So I really commend the work that Deputy Chief Merrill and Chief Lowe have done and continue to do to have such a community focus and a public focus in their application of public safety services. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Good job.